Are you exhausted by toxic people and want to know how Jesus would respond? Do you feel guilty in setting boundaries as a Christian? Are you being spiritually manipulated? What did Jesus really do during these situations? So, our topic for today is how Jesus handled toxic and narcissistic people. Hi, beloved. This is Doc Gilbert, and I am a Christian clinical counselor and psychologist. So, welcome to our YouTube channel. If you are new here, I believe it's not an accident, and God sent this video for a purpose. And so, for our today's episode, we're gonna talk about how Jesus handled toxic and narcissistic people. I know in the past episodes, I've been building up, topics about narcissistic and toxic people. I've discussed about the traits, characteristics, and the impact and effects of these people among survivors. And in a painful and sad reality, narcissistic people are very present among Christian churches today. And is it because the Holy Spirit is not powerful enough to bring change? Is it because transformation is not available? Is God weak in bringing change to these people? And I know I've discussed that it's not about those things. We know God is always at work and willing to do a change in our lives. Having our relationship with Him becomes a healing attachment to our deepest trauma and losses. But also, when we talk about toxic and narcissistic people, these people lack self-awareness. So meaning they do not see that they have characteristics that must be changed. There are behaviors that becomes red flags and hurting people. They do not see their weakness. They don't want to see their weakness because it is associated with shame. And acknowledging their weakness would actually shame them, would actually brought forth shatteredness in their identity, in their self-worth, in their sense of self. And yes, there is a need for self-awareness so that we can see what are the things that we need to change in our lives, in our behaviors. But for these people, they cannot see that. They don't want to see that. They unconsciously evade those characteristics, and many times the issues that they have, they project it to other people. They deflect, they project, they displace, they attack, all these maneuvers become a way to actually, put these issues that they have onto others so that they would not feel shame, they would not feel inferior, which is many from these people, they degrade, they shame, they attack, they blame, they gaslight, so that they would become superior in their own reflections, in their own perceptions, and that they would make others feel inferior so that they would look like that they're good, they're best. And, sadly, these people are unlikely to change. I'm not saying that uh, God cannot change them. There are very, very small percentages that these narcissistic people really go forth, towards change and transformation. And but most of the time, they're not. And one of the major factors of that, it's because these people are in the authority position. They have power, they can control, they can manipulate, they can get away with anything that they do. They are actually excellent and intelligent people, so they were able to climb up the ladders of success and put themselves in a position of authority. So that's why many from these people do not actually change. because they have this sense of power and control, to use these positions to abuse and hurt others, and to get away from accountability and consequences. So, in this episode, in connection with that, we need to look at how the Bible define and really shows this narcissistic people, in terms of their behaviors and their traits. And I'm gonna put the Bible verses down here as I read these verses for you. Okay? So, one of the major characteristics is entitlement and superiority. And actually, we can read that in Matthew 23:6. And I want to quote, and they love the place of honor at feast and the best seats in the synagogues. So in this verse, we can see that these people loves admiration from others. They want and crave for attention, for affirmation, that people would look at them as somehow superior, all good, the best, And we can see here in the Bible, in this verse, that they love the best seats in the synagogue. So it talks about a position of publicity where people would know that they are in the authority position. It has fame, it has authority. It also uses at feast. So there is a lot of gathering. There are a lot of people being present in this event. So and synagogues represents spirituality and religiosity. So we can see here that narcissistic people craves for attention, that they would be, look like above from the rest, that they are superior and untouchable. Okay? And second, one of the major characteristics of narcissistic people is the lack of empathy. So we can read in Matthew 23:4. So let me read this for you. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on people's shoulders. But they themselves are not willing to move them with their finger. Okay? So it reflects emotional hardness and no compassion. So imagine allowing others to suffer for a responsibility or obligation. And we can read that, with this phrase, lay them on people's shoulders. So they would like to really pass on, oblige others to do the things that they are actually responsible to do, so that they would feel at ease, comforted, not hustled. And even with that, they are also not willing to take responsibility. So these people climbed up at the position, at this kind of authority, so that they can demand others to obey them. They can, manipulate others to do the jobs for them. And we can see it in a lot of situations. For example, politicians in the Philippines are not attending, for example, the Senate hearing, not doing their work, but they're able to uh, gain salary and, still maintain this position of power and image that they are an authority figure. So, and they don't have empathy. They cannot feel what others are suffering from. They do not connect with the negative emotions. They don't want to understand. And many times, they would actually gaslight or, distort the reality, that you should not feel this way because this is the right thing to do, and to invalidate, to minimize their experience. So that's very, very true for narcissistic people. And we can read that in Matthew 23:4. Okay? Third, there is manipulation and hypocrisy. So we can read, I may quote, Matthew 23, verse 27. So it says here, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. Okay, so Jesus is talking here. For you are like whitewashed tombs, which outwardly appear beautiful, but within are full of dead people's bones and all uncleanness. Wow, these are very powerful and direct words that Jesus quoted, against this religious people. And many times I use this in counseling to show the counselees that it is okay to be angry with injustice, with abuse, with offense, with toxicity, because this is a natural reaction from cross boundaries, that these people did, from the harm that they did. And, Jesus is actually the most emotionally mature and aware person, that his anger is actually matched with the words that he was using. Okay, so he used to describe narcissistic people as whitewashed tombs and, full of dead people's bones and uncleanness. So imagine, those are very powerful, critical words to describe the state of the heart and spirit of these people. And it's not because Jesus is condemning them, uh, not giving them hope, a chance to change, but he was just actually asserting the reality, the truth of their behaviors, which, of course, many from these people, because of their manipulation, hypocrisy, they were able to deceive a lot of people, in turn leading them away from an encounter with God, leading them from encountering Jesus for who he really is, as the Son of God. And yes, it is right for us to judge, having this right judgment by describing that these behaviors are actually deceiving, manipulative, hypocrite, and many from these people, they use that as a tactic to gain power and access to your life, to be in control. These people are hungry, to be in control, because many from their past, that they've lost power. They were helpless as a child, due to the abuse that was happening, that is being done against them. So yes, there is manipulation and hypocrisy that we can read from this verse. So, how did Jesus handle these narcissistic people during his time? So, I'm gonna give some of the examples. So, first, he called out hypocrisy directly. Okay, so we can read it. I know I've read the few verses with this. Matthew 23, verses 25 to 28. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you clean the outside of the cup and the plate, but inside they are full of greed and self indulgence. You also outwardly appear righteous to others, but within you are full of hypocrisy and lawlessness. So here we can see directly that Jesus actually confronted the negative and toxic and abusive behaviors of these Pharisees. And he needed to do that, in order to also bring awareness for the people who are following them. When we look at the positions that these Pharisees and religious people, they have so much influence in spirituality and even psychology, for the people who are attending the synagogues, or going to the church. And yes, its impact is, people becomes more blind, that they cannot see that God has so much empathy, compassion for them, that there is forgiveness, that they can actually hear God and encounter God and not need, uh, they do not need a Pharisee or religious person to have an intimacy with God. So he needed to call out these behaviors to bring enlightenment to what's happening, and its impact to the people that they who are following them. Okay? So many times in counseling and in general process of healing, we need to call out the specific experience, behavior, uh, emotional intensity, especially with abuse. We need to call it as it is because that's the way to heal. We need to name so that we can tame the amygdala, the threat center of the brain. We need to name what is full of shame so that we can experience healing. So here, Jesus is also demonstrating the psychological impact about naming the abuse that we experience, naming the toxicity, the neglect, the loss, the pain, the hurt that was done to us. And in that way, we are able to experience freedom from the shackles of lies and deceptions that, we deserve what happened to us. And many times from abusive victims, from abuse survivors and victims, they believe that they deserve it, that it's okay, it's their fault, that they are evil, they like it because the abuse is not yet named. And this is a powerful representation on how Jesus actually is teaching us to name our experience, to name the abuse, the wrong that was done against us. Okay? So, second, Jesus actually refused to be manipulated. And if I may quote from Luke chapter 20, verses 21 to 26, so it is said here, Teacher, we know that you speak and teach rightly. Is it lawful for us to give tribute to Caesar or not? So here, the Pharisees, the religious people, were asking a trap question, so that when Jesus answered, it's not, then it's not, lawful to give tribute to Caesar, then it is a trap in a way that could bring this the Romans to attack Jesus. If he did not say uh you know it is lawful, meaning if he supports Caesar, then he is somehow like condemning the church. So it's actually a trap question, but because Jesus is intelligent and has wisdom, so he said here, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. So Jesus did not fall into, wanting flattery, wanting to woo or please them, by saying, we need to revolt against the Romans. We don't need to give tribute to them. He refused to be manipulated. And he actually, in a way, set mental boundary, among these religious people. And it's a huge, insight to say that he did not seek validation from them. Yes, they are in a more authoritative position because they are religious leaders from that time. But Jesus couldn't care less. What matters to him is reaching to the people who would listen, who would believe in him, who would reach out, who would be trained and who would make disciples along the way. So, and besides, even though he know a lot of truthful things, these people have hard hearts. They would refuse to listen. Otherwise, Jesus would just waste his energy. So he actually preserved his energy to more important things like discipling his disciples during that time. Okay. So third, he actually shut down toxic agendas. And that's very powerful. So let me read at Mark chapter 3, verses 5 to 6. And he looked around at them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart. The Pharisees went out and immediately held counsel with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. So here, Jesus actually can acknowledge the toxic agenda. And even though he knows that he can escape, he can use his power, he became firm in his mission, in his purpose, in saving us, in fulfilling his mission, towards death on the cross, the crucifixion, the agony, and the trauma of it all. And he needs to do that. And because that's a necessary process for our redemption. So yes, the toxic agenda could, lead or tempt him to use his power against his people. He could do that. He is the most powerful being, the Alpha and the Omega, the Word at the beginning, but more than his own agenda, more than being trapped and being manipulated to react negatively against his people, he stood firm to what God is calling him to do. And, he set his eyes on the prize, and the prize is us, our relationship restored in him. Okay? So, let's look at how Jesus actually modeled and set boundaries from toxic people. Okay? So, and even boundary in general. So, number one, he actually withdrew from harmful people. Okay, in John 10:39, I may quote, again, they sought to arrest him, but he escaped from their hands. So, Jesus physically removes himself when he felt unsafe during that time. Aside from the reason that it's not time for him to be arrested, but there is a physical boundary that he did. And many times, I teach my counselees that, you need to block the person in social media, or maybe restrict in social media, maybe lessen your physical visitation, lessen to be there physically in bondings, or altogether cut off these people physically. You don't need to see them, relate with them, connect with them physically, because how much, even though you've grown much, you've healed much, still there is a level of toxicity, of impact that these people, manifest because of their toxic behaviors. It's like a fire. When we go near to the fire, we feel the heat. Even though we don't touch it, there is still some level of hotness based on the proximity and how near or how far we are. So the same is true with dealing with toxic people. Physical boundary is a must, and Jesus did that, from this toxic people. Second, he did not trust everyone, I mean. So in John 2:24, it says here, but Jesus on his part did not entrust himself to them because he knew all people. So there is discernment in Jesus' heart, in Jesus' mind. He has wisdom. He knows the motives of people. Those who would actually accuse him, attack him, will not believe in him. And the people who are actually would be, soft to disciple, soft to lead him unto him. So uh, we need also to be sure of the people that we entrust our lives. Okay? At least find 2 to 3 people that you know that you're safe, your stories are safe, and that you would not be gossip, betrayed. No, although of course it's not always 100%, but I hope that you'll find at least 2 to 3 people. And third, he actually limited his access. We can see in Mark 5:37 and Matthew 17:1, Jesus has his own inner circle. And that's Peter, James, and John, his closest disciples. And actually, it models healthy boundaries because in reality, not everyone we will have a same level of closeness, uh, of relationships. That's the reality. It's not that Jesus is playing favorite. It's just that he has 3 closest disciples in terms of the degree of relationship. And the same is true with us. A part of building boundaries, finding our inner circle where we can be vulnerable at its deepest level. We can be honest, we can confess, we can be authentic. Here, Jesus actually, when he brought John, James, Peter to the Garden of Gethsemane, he was so vulnerable to the point that he showed that he sweat in blood. You know, it was their distance was a stone's throw away, and he actually brought them in his most one of his most vulnerable moments. You know, when he was so depressed, so anxious, when he was about to be crucified. So we need inner circle in our journey, and Jesus demonstrated that. So in terms of Jesus' emotional and spiritual response, there are also examples that we can see in the Bible. So first, there is a righteous anger at abuse. So we can see, if I may read some in Mark chapter 3, verse 5, it says here, he looked around at them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart. So, Jesus actually is modeling that it's okay to be angry. It's very far from the reality of what other evangelical churches, teaching among the people, that it's a sin to be angry. It's wrong. It's dishonoring God or our parents or whatsoever. We just need to be forgiving. We just need to reconcile whatsoever. It's actually a quick fix and not an integrative point of view in terms of our holistic personhood. And we can see here, Jesus became angry. And that's a normal reaction from an offense, an abuse, that was done to us. And Jesus is actually also modeling healthy emotional integration, meaning, his experience is matched with his bodily expression, with his emotional experience, with his words, which makes him a holistic, a whole enough, perfectly actually, perfectly whole enough person because he did not sin. Okay, second, he spoke truth over people pleasing. In Matthew 15, verses 12 to 14, let me read this to you. Then the disciples came and said to him, "Do you know that the Pharisees were offended?" And Jesus answered, "Let them alone. They are blind guides." So he did not came here on earth to please people that would not believe in him, that would attack him, would gossip about him. And this is actually a very important model in terms of growing in our sense of self. That in reality, we cannot please everybody. We cannot win all of people's reactions. We cannot win all's attention. That they would praise us or support us the way we want to. Because of their own toxic traits, it's their lenses. They would actually just be jealous or feel envious and would attack you. So that's the reality, and Jesus knew that. And third, even though he expressed anger, he healthily expressed it and he did not pursue revenge or retaliation. So, before I read the verse, it's very important to know the difference when anger becomes sinful. It's on how we handle our anger. And I know I've discussed that in one of the episodes, so you can go back to the episode about anger. Okay, but here in First Peter 2:23, he says here, when he was reviled, he did not revile in return, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. So here, because of his secure identity with our Heavenly Father and with emotional integration and awareness, and also not being offended in a way personally, he is angry, but he did not take it personally that these behaviors do not define his word, his identity, that these behaviors are actually reflection of these people, in their internal state. But here, he did not revile. He actually didn't use his power, although, I'm actually pretty pissed off, and imagining what what would it be like if he uses power, against these religious people, or against this Roman Empire who set him to be crucified, but he did not. He did not use revenge. And that's also God's invitation for all of us, because in reality there is not such thing, no such thing as perfect justice here on earth. As God willed it to be, there would be justice that we can see happening on earth based on His will or purpose, but there would be no perfect justice. And that's why I also lead my counselees and even myself in the process to grieve this ideal justice that I want. Been, you know, uh, I've faced and been involved with a lot of abuses cases in my own life, in the life of the people that I'm leading, in church, in school, in government. And, I can say to you that there is no justice, that I hope to be. And I needed to grieve that. So, and that's why Jesus is modeling that, because at the end of ages, there would be perfect justice, when Jesus comes back in his second coming. So, how can Christians follow Jesus' model today? I know that you've been learning a lot from, my previous discussions. So, first, to specify it, we can expose abusive behavior. So, in Ephesians 5:11, it says here, take no part in the unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them. So truth telling is biblical. Name calling, asserting, the experiences, the emotional impact, the negative consequences of the abuse of a person is actually biblical. We need to call them out. We need to name what they did. We need to fight for what is truth. Yes, there is a need to set boundary, but when it comes to abuse, we need to stand up for the abuse victims. We need to stand up for ourselves and call out these toxic behaviors at the right platform, meaning, you don't need to go to these narcissistic people and call out his or her behavior, just like what Jesus did. Well, symbolically, it's about calling these behaviors out, maybe, filing a report, reporting it to the higher authority, or maybe like telling this experience to this person or friend or relative for what it is really is. Maybe through counseling, you name the experience of your client. So maybe you're leading a person and you need to voice out what's really happening to him or her. So we need to expose this abusive behavior. So second, we need to learn how to set boundaries with guilt. Okay? So in John 2:24, we can see that Jesus actually limited his access and self-disclosure. I know in the process it would be hard, especially if you're just starting and setting boundary. If it really involves close people in your life, there is guilt, maybe you're a bad person, you're selfish, you're not compassionate or empathic, and that's okay. That's part of the process. And maybe you can actually lead your self into this reality testing by reminding of yourself of the reality, using evidences. What makes you say that these, beliefs are not true? What are the truth about it? Okay, you can rehearse those statements. And third, you can refuse manipulation. You can stand up in your truth. Do not allow yourself to be guilt tripped, to be blamed, to receive deflection, projection. You will not, you can stand up against fear and pressure to succumb. You can do that, by the power of the Holy Spirit. And with the boundaries in place. Okay, and then you need to prioritize safety over suffering. And many times in John 39, we can actually see that Jesus left, places that he felt danger. and there is really a wisdom. Maybe it could be leaving that romantic relationship that involves battering or physical abuse and assault, or maybe leaving this friendship, or leaving this church, or leaving this physical space with your narcissistic parents. So there must be priority of your physical safety, because your physical safety is really connected with your psychological safety as well. Okay, and then you may forgive without enabling abuse. Here in Luke 23:34, we can read that uh, Jesus said, Father, forgive them, but they do not know what they are doing. And also, forgiveness is always a heart posture. And just like what I discussed, it's a process. We cannot force it to come. We can be intentional in forgiving one offense at a time, but we also have to be realistic that it is a process. And it does not equate that you have to stay in that toxic relationship, toxic friendship, toxic family, toxic systems, toxic church. Forgiving does not equate enabling the abuse. And just like what I've discussed, with what Jesus did, we can see that he did not say that with his actions, nor did he use those words that forgiveness is equated to be reconciled with these people. Okay? So, in conclusion, if there is one person that could totally understand and see the reality of what's happening in the body of Christ in terms of the presence of narcissistic people and their impact to them, Jesus knows. And in my experience of counseling, there are a lot of church trauma and wounds that many people do not know. Many people tend to neglect, hyper spiritualize, use forgiveness just to negate and bury and minimize these experiences. And we can look at the Jesus and how he handled it with wisdom. We can follow his model today. And in reality, beloved, we live in a broken world where there are many people, even if they are professed Christians, they do not do the hard work of looking at themselves, become self aware of their behaviors, and really pursue the process of change and face their own traumas and losses, that becomes the root causes of their own narcissistic behaviors. And, their wounds are licking and bringing harm to a lot of people. But we have a choice. We have the power. Who are the people that we are going to let into our lives? We can choose boundary. We can choose awareness. We can choose the truth. Just like what Jesus did. So that's it. And I know this is a painful topic to discuss, but I am really blessed to have this opportunity to teach this with you. So if you've learned something, you have insights, reflections, ideas, personal encounters with God through these, please don't hesitate to comment down below and even share and ask, regarding the topics that you want me to discuss. And if you know someone who knows who may needs to hear this, please do share this video. And if you are new here, please do subscribe. And by subscribing, you are helping the Ministry of Healing of Intimacy Philippines, to bring more healing to many people and beyond. So yun lang. Hope to see you in our next episode. Hanggang sa muli.